Good morning, everybody, and here we are once again. It is a Thursday morning, December 5th, and jumping right in. Today I'm working on a little bit of the scene, the quality, the appearance of it, and I've been playing around with some lighting. I've been playing around with some fog, and I've been doing all kinds of things to make the scene look a little bit more real. And one of the things I ran across is we had implemented some different functions for shadows, but we have not completed them. So I want to go ahead and jump back to that and complete those shadows so that we can see if we can get some shadows going on all the objects that you walk past and, just enhance the scene with the shadowing. So today we're going to jump right in here. And in the code page, well, first of all, let's take a look at the scene. One of the things I've been doing is I've been working on, notice the horizon in the distance is now a little bit blurred, so that there's no concrete point of where the horizon is. It was a crisp line yesterday, and now I've made it where it's a nice blurred piece down there. And basically what that's going to do is it gives us the more appearance of going off into the distance where it's continuous, but yet there's no exact point of continuous or continuity. No, I'm making up words here. I feel like Bush W, right? Okay, so the other part though is notice that we have a box here, we have a box here, we have a flag, we have a golf club, we have an avatar. These different items are in the scene. In fact, I'm going to back him up just a touch, go back to the scene camera, so we get a good overview of what we're looking at. And none of these objects have shadows applied to them, even though our setting for shadows are cranked up all the way. We should be able to see all shadows coming from all objects on anything that, notice when I edit this, and I go to Advanced Settings, and I scroll down here and it says allow shadows on surface. So that means we have a shadow generator needed for each object that has that particular setting. Reflects on water, I don't need that one right now. There's no water in this scene, so we won't worry about that piece. But I do want to allow shadow generators. So save that box. We're going to start with making sure the extended ground, which is this ground all the way around out here, first picks up the shadows and gets it for our avatar and other objects in the scene. And then when we walk up onto here, I want to make sure the same shadow's showing down on this part. So we're going to start with those two places and... Thanks. And so that's where we're at. That's what we're going to start on, and we're going to see if we can't fix those objects. The reason they're not showing is because I never told them to. So we never finished the process, we never got them in place, and we never hooked it up. There's some shadows that are working, but this is obviously not one of them. Usually when they come in with the Blender objects, I didn't finish hooking those up, so that's kind of why I picked this scene, because we have the avatar comes from Blender, the golf course comes from Blender, the club and the flagpole all come from Blender. So technically boxes like this should already work, but notice also whenever you have something that has a shadow generator, it does not cast a shadow also. And that's because it appears that the only thing I was able to get working in the past with Babylon is that it can either cast or receive shadows, but not both. Just want to put that out there to begin with. So we may be adding some objects to the screen like a box just to see what it does. In fact, that might not be a bad idea. So just for now, edit building block. Let's put just a simple box out here and go up off the ground. And let's see, I want to put it someplace that I know it's going to hit a shadow on both ground and the other piece. I can do this pretty simple. Let's shrink it up this way. And then let's go longer this way. Then I know that some of it is going to be on this ground and some of it's going to be on this ground when it works. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff that we want to make sure can cast a shadow. Let's see. Just checking my settings. See, allow shadows on surface. I'm not expecting shadows to be on the surface of this box, but that means it's eligible to cast a shadow on something else. We're going to start with some simple things here. First thing is, I'm not in a community, I'm in a building. There's a function I wrote that adds shadow to shadow maps. When this particular function gets called in a number of places, and most of them have to do with, in common here, I'm going to bounce through a couple of these places. I want to see when it's called because I want to make sure I'm not doubling up on the work. Set shadow settings. Yeah, jeez. Okay, so set shadow settings, that's fine. I think we've got a few of them. We have 6 items that are right in there. Okay. Actually, we have all these that are all part of this. Okay, so when I change the shadow settings, that's when, I know, a little tongue twister there. That's when those get used. But what's this one here? Yeah. Okay, so this one, if it's greater than 0, then it sets it. And I believe this is in process mold queue. Okay. This is when it creates the mold. So anything that gets created basically through the machine, through it creating it, any type of mold that gets created, it will create the mold and then set the mold to the shadow map here. The only thing is, remember that certain objects like Babylon files have a square cube and everything is parented. I mean, that's the parent of the whole object. So this mold that it's actually passing as an object right here is actually that little cube and not the whole Blender object after the fact. So even though this is putting something in here, it's not actually working with the components that make up that object. Okay, so that's something worth knowing. Okay, and I know we've got a few pieces here. The rest of this is part of the admin, which isn't going to be effective when somebody's browsing the website. So I want to make sure I'm setting these items all within the area where it's actually using them. So the first thing is this one should catch that box that we just created. And to make sure, I want to see, we're going to just basically spit out the name. And we don't have too many objects in here, so it's worth, I'm going to go ahead and just kick out the mold name on the screen, just in a way that we know where it is. Okay, and just by doing that, we should get the names of the molds over here, which there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish. Oh, it's doing it multiple times. See, that's another part that I want to make sure we're not repeating. See, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 2, 3, 4. I just ran that process 4 different times. Oh, because it's not even working with the current mold that I'm talking about. But see, I do have 2 functions here. This one is about adding this to anything that already has a shadow map. So, okay, think of it this way. An object can either cast a shadow or it receives a shadow. When I create this object and it just gets added to a scene, that means anything else that's already in the scene that can receive a shadow needs to basically render that shadow onto the scene. So this one, WTW Shadows, is the shadow generator that is on the extended ground. If that makes sense. Then anything else after that, we have to find the objects, and then we have to tell it that it can receive a shadow, and we add this mold to the expected shadows that it can generate. So later on we can get technical and we can even check the we can check to see if that mold is within the load zone that the piece is in. That way we're not adding a bunch of shadows to areas that are nowhere near the piece that you're supposed to cast a shadow on. That kind of makes a little sense to me too. In fact, we could do that. I kind of like that idea because the bigger you make the scene, the more objects you're going to have in it, and why worry about some objects that aren't part of the piece, the scene that you're trying to do. So, okay. Well, first, I'm going to take a little side trip here. There's two functions. Add shadow to shadow maps means put this mold, make it cast shadows on objects that are set for that. And then the second one is add shadow to mold. And that one is the function that actually does the step. So if I come in here and go to my basic avatars, and when it creates all the various meshes that are part of the object, I should be able to take this function right here, and I should be able to take this mesh and add it to this shadows. And let's find out, just for the quick win, let's find out if that actually creates a shadow for our avatar to the extended ground. If all works right, it should actually cast a shadow, unless it gives an error. No? Okay, we still do not have a shadow. See, it's not doing it. Okay, which is still something we'll work on. I got to start with something working, then I can come back in here and make everything work. Okay, I thought I was going to get a quick win. We'll go back to what we're doing. Okay, next step here is in this section, we need to know if this object is set to receive shadows. So I'm going to come in here and because what that's going to do is it's going to tell us which objects have that checkbox done. And now I should get just the one name of the box that has the piece. So we should get this name of this box. Oops, try catch a what'd I miss? Oh, that makes sense. If this, there we go. Now it looks like it's supposed to. Thinking ahead of where I'm at, forgot to put the if statement. Okay, now notice that it only found the one object, which is a box, and it happens to be this box right here. So we know that's the box that we're trying to put a shadow on. The next step is, once we've identified which box needs a shadow, then we're going to check and see if the shadows are turned on for that particular box. We have that right. This right here. Copy that. And if this equals blank, then I want to create a shadow map on that piece. And I've already done this in some places, so I'm just going to go get the shadow map real quick. That way we'll already have, here it is right here. What line am I on so I can bounce back to it quick? Oh, I'm not in this file. Good. Well, that's interesting. I don't create the shadow maps, only in basic molds. Huh. Where am I creating that? Mold name parts. Oh, light bulbs can cast shadows. So that one I've already done. This right here, and this and that are the settings for creating a shadow map. And we're going to bring that over to here. And we're going to create the shadow map on this particular box since it's And let's see, this will be everything right here. First of all, we're in building molds. We have to do this for all three of the objects, so we'll do it for building molds first, and then we'll do it for the others. But because I'm working in a building, that's the easiest way to do this piece right now, and then we'll go back and make it work for the other objects. It tells it, first of all, what the density of the shadow map, so it's going to be the pixels that it uses as a square pattern. It can either be 512, 10, 24, 486. You know, it's got to be multiples. The 2 by, you know, the setup, a factor of 2 on the different pieces. This particular piece that we're putting in here, that adds the light. Now, what we're going to be using right now, the light that we want to make sure that we're getting, is the actual sunlight. We can worry about other sun sources at different times, but right now that's the one that we want to make work. Then we can continue to add different ones in there. So now it says receive shadows, and that will make sure that this piece has a particular has a shadow map generator, shadow generator, built into this item, and we're naming it part of the building molds array, just so that we have an easy way to go back, get it, collapse it, and kill it afterwards when we're done using it. So from there we've created the shadow map, and now finally we want to tell it to actually add the mold to the shadow map. So if it's receive shadows, it checks and makes sure that it has this. That's the shadow map, and then the one we're going to add to it is just like what we did here. We're going to go here. We're adding the mold that we just created. So it's going to be whatever mold was created, and it's going to come in here, and then this right here is going to be the shadow map that it adds to. And then when we do this process, I don't even think we need, oh yes we do. This is making sure that if it runs this process more than once, then it checks the rendered list to see if the item, that the mold that we currently have, is by name, if it's found within the render list. Okay, so it's looking to see if the mold name is in the render list's names. And if it finds it, then we already know it's there. Otherwise, if it's not found and the mold is not null, then it will, wow, mold is null. I think we checked that way back here, wouldn't we? Set timeout. Oh, another thing this thing does is I set a timeout just a little delay when it puts the shadows on, because when we did them too fast, the mold wasn't created in time, and it actually did not add the shadows because it was trying to put them there before the mold was finishing rendering, because some of that stuff happens asynchronous. So we have to make sure that it's after the piece is created. So this is all fine, and we add the shadow caster, boom, mold goes in there. The last thing to notice, yeah, we are double checking. We're double checking to receive shadows is false. Opacity is greater than 0.41. If the item's invisible, it shouldn't cast a shadow-ish. That isn't necessary. I can even drop that a lot less, but for now, let's see what that does. Because now we should find the shadow, or the mold that receives shadows, and which is this one. And then we should be getting some type of reference to it. And then the final part of that is I want to make sure we're not too high so we can actually get some type of shadow on there. And the last part of that is if it did an error, which it didn't, then the last part would be make sure that we're doing dark enough of a setting. I'm going to set darkness for now. I'm going to set it to 1. I want to see solid black just to know that it happened. We can always come back and lighten it once we see the shadow, but I don't want there to be any guesswork that the shadow appeared or not. In this case, we still do not have a shadow because it would be so much more obvious. Now, the other part is, I do have to tell you this, if this box was created before this, then that process this one didn't receive it yet. So when this piece gets created, there's the opposite effect, which is when it's created and it does receive shadows, it has to look in the scene, find all the current molds that are already built in the scene, and add them to this particular box's available pieces to create shadows. So it's kind of like twofold. It depends on which one shows up first. Let's see here. So I believe that this would add the shadow to the mold, and I believe it is going right here. In fact, we're going to test that. And we're going to say added equals mold name. I just want to know that it got that far, because if it did add, that means that that mold was there when that was created, and we have something else wrong with our shadow map or our sun source or 100 other possible things, but we're going to find out. See, it says it added, but it added it twice. See, that's a problem too. Why would it add it twice if it already found it in the map? See, we still have an issue here. Once it's added twice, we have other issues. So let's find out why, unless there's 2 objects I'm adding, which is a possibility. No, I'm adding this building mold. Why would it be adding it twice? Let's find out. There's not too many objects in the scene, so let's compare equals. I want to know what the difference is. Or did some of these names come up without a name and I have to use the ID instead of name? We're going to find out right now. Then I'm going to find out why it should run often. Don't get me wrong on that. It should run often because when an object gets added, it's running through this part again. Compare. Yeah, Babylon, Babylon, Babylon. Okay, those 3 are all Babylon files that it's comparing. That would be the avatar. No, that would be the building objects. I'm sorry. That would be this item, the golf club, and the flag are these 3 items that it compared. But it did not see this object, which means when this was checked, that didn't exist yet. Okay, that's what that's going to do. Guess we'll worry about that in a minute then. When this piece gets added, that should have already existed. We should have... Well, I'm kind of confused. This particular object, just to double check, is not set to that. We don't need that either, but working way through this. This is the kind of stuff we have to do to fix things. I'm concerned that the box wasn't compared, means it wasn't in the building molds. Hey, good morning. How's it going? Well, cool deal. As you can see, we did a bunch of things on the scene. So far, I've been improving the lighting situation. I created a backlight so that the flag and stuff wouldn't be just seen from the sunlight, but also a lesser light on the back side of it. I created a little bit of a horizon to have some fog in the distance so that it kind of blurs out the horizon line. You know, just trying to enhance the scene. And now I'm trying to find out why my different shadows aren't kicking onto the scene, so doing a little bit of troubleshooting and trying to see what's happening here. Because this box right here, it says it's added, but yet it didn't do the compare. It never got to this other part. So if it was added, it means it got to here, and mold name is not undefined. That wouldn't. Kind of curious about that. Just out of curiosity, let's find out if that happened right there. Oh, why am I doing if shadow map render list equals null? Well, that does make sense. Render list just means there's nothing in there yet, which means the first index would be not -1. That doesn't make sense. I know, I'm making this dynamic, and I think I tricked myself in this little function I did here. If that, which would be starting with a 0, and I set this to -1, knowing that -1 isn't going to work, but I is 0 is less than, that is not the case. I just need something that says else. No, we don't need an else. I don't know why I'm checking that. I don't remember why. I think if I pulled something out and it ends up having a null, means that that value is available to use, but that doesn't mean that it's not already found. That means I can fix. Oh, it equals render length right there. Oh, okay, so that's just finding out the next available value, and then if I find it, it should be, I should set it to that value, but if it's found, it's not being added anyway. That doesn't even matter. Okay, so this is actually just a second function that still needs to be checked, because we need to know if it's found, and it doesn't check to see if it's found if it finds the next available value. That's what's wrong with our part. It's one of the reasons I'm going through all these different parts to make sure our shadows are working everywhere. This compare right here. Now we should get a compare of every object and every item. And let's find out what happens there. We should have 4 compares now. I'm still wondering why it's being added twice. That doesn't make sense to me. That still didn't do it. This box here, compare the box to the item's already in there with that. So the compare did not find anything in there, and basically we should be adding it. But why did the added happen before it? That doesn't even make sense to me. It's adding it before I compare. I can see how adding it would happen here, but how could it not, unless this is the case? Oh, it wouldn't go to this because there were nothing in there. It was empty. It adds it. Got it. Okay, but why was it adding it twice is my problem. It should not add that mold twice because... Oh, I know why. They're 2 different shadow maps. I'm using this process twice, which means the first thing we're doing is we're adding it into right here. We're adding it to the default shadows, which are part of the complete scene, which happens there. And then we're adding it to here, which is the building object that can cast a shadow, that receives shadows. Yay, okay, okay. Okay, I'm making progress here. Oh, just getting going, just getting going. That makes sense. I forgot to ask what shadow map we're actually looking at. So we added it to both shadow maps, and it's there by name, which means, once again, why isn't it casting a shadow? If that's the case, this box should cast a shadow on that ground. And it should be at the angle of, the diagonal angle of its own stuff. I just don't know why. Which is, once again, why I'm troubleshooting this. Yeah, it's even close to the ground. We're not getting a shadow. Just making sure. Due diligence. Is it going the other direction? I just don't see it. It would be obvious if it was casting a shadow. It really would be obvious. And also, see how that light goes across here? When that light goes across there, we should see the shadow. That should be really clear for us to see a shadow underneath there. And see how it's... It's clearly not casting a shadow. I should be able to see it like from this angle, really extreme down on the ground there. Okay, time to figure out what's going on with our shadowing. I'm going to set start position here because I don't want to keep moving around every time I go to check something. Okay, and so we know that the building mold itself, by name, is getting added to the shadow caster of that particular shadow map. And it's adding multiple items because we are able to add this item into there. So, oh, that wouldn't be it. Okay. That's the reason that one's the only one added, because the opacity on those other items are 0 for the cube that starts the whole piece. Oh, thank you. Okay, start simpler. Let's go back over here. Got to get some shadows to work before we can get them all to work. So Let's find out where this item is starting its shadow map. It should be. Okay, that's interesting. I do not see any code. Here it is. That one here is using the sun, which is what we would expect, and it's creating the shadow map, and I'm going to set the darkness to 1 because I really want to see these. Shadow bias, we'll worry about some of these other settings afterwards. Extra ground, receive shadows is true. That one should show, by default, the extra ground should receive shadows using this shadow map. Are we setting that? Where do we tie this shadows to the extra ground? I don't think I actually did that. That would explain some of the issues. I create the shadows. This whole part's going to be cleaned out when I fix this because that isn't needed anymore. I have a different function for doing it. So that part, and I'm doing it here, and I'm doing it here. Yeah, this whole function that I just wrote is actually going to do what this stuff does. Mold receive shadows equals that. Otherwise, add shadow to shadow maps, mold, and it's going to be added in there. So this, at the beginning here, though, it sends mold to the shadow maps, but that one says that. We never sent the extra ground to receive them. Okay, let's go back to the books. Let's figure out why shadows aren't working. You create a shadow map with a light source. Okay, got your shadow generator, your shadow map, render, push, and you put the objects in it that are going to cast the shadow using it. Then you set things where the shadows be displayed by setting a mesh parameter to true. Okay, that should be it. Can you have multiple shadow generators, or is that where my issue is? That might be the issue. That was something I didn't test. I think when I started to create the second shadow generator, I think there's no way to determine, because I don't see it tying, like, for example, the ground to receive shadows. It's not tying it to a specific shadow generator, which means once you have a shadow generator in your scene, that may be the only one you have. Then you just say if something receives the shadows or if you're adding another object that can create a shadow. Does that make sense? Yeah, because I don't see how the ground knows. The ground doesn't know which shadow generator to use, which means you can only have one in a scene. That would be our problem. Okay, so shadow generator. Find files. I want to make sure we're not generating these. Then the only thing we have to do on, for example, this part is we do not need any of that. Because you can't create a second shadow generator. Unless you have a different light source, by the way. That is a... Oh, wait a minute. Then there's got to be a way to tie... Okay, that's an advanced topic. We haven't gotten that far yet. Let's just fix this first. So the first thing is we take, let's put this to WTW shadows, because I think that's the name of the, yep, right here. We're doing it with shadows. We're creating, that doesn't matter now. So we want to take this item, which is get mesh by ID, and we're going to use this mold name, and we're going to get this mold. If the mold is not null, then the mold dot receive shadows equals true. That'll make sure that that item can receive the shadows, and if it's not set for that, then basically we add the shadow to the mold, we take the mold and use this shadow map, we're passing it back in there, and now this box should only be added to receive shadows once. Actually, see, that's where it's testing it right there. Oh, receive shadows equals false. Okay, so this goes this way, and if it's not receive shadows, then, well, I could do it this way. You can only add into the shadow map if the mold itself is not null. So I'm not adding objects that aren't created yet. They're all created equal. No. Okay, I'm getting there. And then we take that and indent it. I'm working my way through this because receive shadows is true, else receive shadows is false. We'll make sure it has a true setting one way or the other. And then we're only we don't even need that anymore. I know which ones are going there. Okay, so that should set the properties of the right thing. The shadow mold is already created. Let's find out if that made it there. Oh, there was one more place I'm doing a shadow generator. Like I said, if I have more than one shadow generator, I don't think it's going to work. So let's try again. There's a shadow generator here, which is... that one's in basic molds. I generated one with that. I don't want to undo that because that should... Still confused about the use of that, but that's not being used in this scene, so I'm not worried about that one. But this one, on the other hand, is... that's the one we're using to actually create our shadow map. This is the one that we're actually using. I want to make sure this gets created before we start adding things to it, just in case it's null, we have an issue. So created shadow map, just so we have some type of reference point. I want to make sure it's happening in the right order and things are being added to it. So let's find out. So shadow map happens at the beginning. But see, we are not getting a shadow here or here from that particular object. So we still do not have shadows adding to our scenes. Go back to here. Shadowcaster. Let's look back at our code. Let's find out shadow map render list. I was trying to use a Shadowcaster is what I just saw in the code, and Shadowcaster wasn't even something in this version when they wrote this page. For now, let me back up a list here, and let's do it, push it to the render list instead of add Shadowcaster, and see if that's where we've gone amok at this point in time. So if I do this, shadow map, and we remark out our Shadowcaster at this particular time, because I think that broke what was working. So let's start with this. I don't know why Shadowcaster didn't work, because that was a newer form of creating the shadow maps, but hey, if it's not working, it's not working. But if this other method doesn't work either, then we still have an issue anyway. We should be adding that box to it, which means it should cast a shadow on this and this, because these two items are receiving shadows. Receive shadows. You know, I still do that every time I spell receive. I before E except after C. I want to see which ones are receiving at this point in time and make sure that we get all the ones that we expect for our sunlight here. Okay. We did not receive. Nothing clicked on receive. So that box didn't get set for receive for some reason, which kind of not positive why. Because that setting should have been true on that particular one. Mold name. We know the mold name came through. It's not null. So nothing's receiving shadows. That explains why it's not working at that point. Like I said before, one of the things that it may be that all the code is correct, but what's happening is it's a timing issue. If you try to add, I've had this happen before, where if I try to add a shadow to something too soon after we create it, then it's not done creating it in the scene, even though we know it's in the scene. And so a little time delay usually ends up making the shadow work. And I think receive shadows could be getting the same issue here. I just want to make sure that that name of that particular object that we expect to receive the shadows is getting set, because if it isn't, then there's no way this would work for that. So let's find out. Cannot read property name of null. There's a problem. Oh, since it's comparing against the name not being null. What item has a name that's null? Is it ID that's not null? So the name comes up here, because we already know what it is. Then it says it's not null. And then it says property name of null. Okay, we have this could be the case where receive didn't come through because it property name of null. But that's not null to get that far. Excuse me. Oh, that one we're testing too soon. Let's put the mold name here. Because then we'll know if a mold name is not null, and then it'll get the name at that point. Okay. Let's test that. Something's null already. See, that's the problem, is the mesh is null when it comes through there. So it's not... Okay, so in this case, the Babylon file, then we have the box, and then we have a second box that's not null. This one's not created in the scene yet. This one is. Let's find out which one's which. Okay. We can find that out pretty easily. Go into the table, go into building molds. Building ID equals that value we just copied off the top of our page. And we have two boxes. One has a texture and one has a color. The texture is the base one, but you can also tell by the size 50 by 80, where this one is a 32 by 5 by 10. So that's our box that we're trying to hover over, and this is the other box is on the ground. So the IKV or LKI, yeah, whatever that is, that one, which is this one, is not processing because it's null at that point in time. So we're trying to add the box, but this particular one wasn't created yet in the scene. So when it's going through, that doesn't happen yet. That doesn't happen yet. And it doesn't happen yet. Okay. It's showing up on our list of building molds, but when it's created, it did not... Oh, it doesn't even process this section here. Okay. Okay, so what I need to do is basically, it's not running this process to add the mold into the shadow maps and stuff. There's another reason why I'm cleaning this section up, because add shadow to shadow maps, we're catching if it's a receiving shadows or if it's sending shadows. All we have to do is take every mold that's created and throw it through here, and this process should be able to basically decide what it is. I gotta think about that a second. You know, so I'm going to refill my cup, and I'm going to go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break, and I'll be right back with you, okay? And then we're going to dig back in on this and find out where I want to make sure that it's being set to receive shadows, and I have a feeling that that mold, we want to make sure it's receiving shadows, and it's very possible that the ground isn't set to receive the shadows. Every time we build any of these molds and we're adding them to the scene, it's adding the box that casts the shadow, but I think something isn't set to receive the shadows is why the other piece isn't working. But since I'm not using this function when they have that ability, yeah, I have something blocking that, and I'll have to check where I queue them up and when it creates the actual molds, so that after it creates the box that can receive shadows, it either doesn't use this process at all because we don't need to, and then we can just cut that out of here altogether because we don't need to set it. You know, a couple different possibilities here. But I'm going to take about a 5-minute break, and I will be right back. back on. Okay, I'm back. I'm back. Here we go. Okay, so what I'm doing, you know, I had just, there's a couple pieces that are kind of in my mind here. And one of them is I think there's a good possibility that I'm my worst enemy. And the reason I say that is because I think what's happening is, first of all, I started using a shadow caster and tested out some code to do that. And on top of that, that was working. So when I first set it up, it was working, but something since then broke it. And because of that, I don't want to get too far from the prize here. And I think what I need to do, first of all, is let me remark out of the code and let's just check each section one at a time and bring them in here and make sure that I'm not like fighting myself with adding a piece and then like here, add mode coloring. See, this isn't even this section. Okay, add shadows to shadow maps. Okay, what I have is I have these shadows and this is the main shadow map. I'm going to get that one working and then we'll append and add additional ones into it afterwards. But let me do a search on the code. And this gets used quite a few times in different places. So what I want to do, is this stuff safe? This is checking to see. That one didn't even need it. Is shadow setting equals no, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's just getting a shadow setting. That's not what I'm talking about here. If WT shadows equal null, set shadow settings. Set shadow settings should be my function that actually brings them in. But let's see here. Right here. See, remove shadow caster. Dispose shadow modes. See, I know I was using a shadow caster now. And I think I'm getting confused between the two functions. That disposes them. And if I'm not saying add shadow to mole, so they're right back to each other here. I'm going to put that back in place for a moment. I'm going to leave that the way it is. No, actually I'm going to remark it out for a minute or 2 or 3 or 5. I'm just basically going to double check, add shadow to mold. That's right where I'm working, so that's the one I want to work. That one is okay because that, how's that different? Oh, I'm doing the same thing. I'm adding the same mold to the mold. Right here, it should be the Z mold, which is the mold that came, the rest of the molds that exist get added to that same. See, I'm confused. That's. Okay, let's back up a step, like I said. Let's make something work, and then we'll add to it instead of. If it wasn't a quick fix, I figured it was going to be a dig in. So now we're digging in. Now we're going to find out what's going on with this stuff, and we're going to fix it all the way to the core of what it's doing. I'm going to remark out that for the moment. Now, I like remarking them out in the far left column because that reminds me that it's a temporary, opposed to remarking something right next to the words tells me that it's something that I'm doing more permanent, or phasing it out, deciding if I need it or not. Shadow set isn't an issue. That's a variable I use to tell how much shadows you want to see in your scene. Right now we have it turned up all the way, so we should get, that shouldn't be an issue for what we're showing. But these, there's a couple different functions here that tell us what type of shadows and what type of sampling to do on those shadows. That we're going to make sure we have the full. We remark it out for now because I don't want to have anything that's going to affect what we're doing. Like here we have a bias of 0.01. I think we're okay on that. Enforce back faces only. I don't remember why I had that. Well, if you don't remember why we had it, I'm going to take out both of those for now. This should be the shadow generator. That's the one where we create the true shadow map. Shadow resolution is based on what you have here. For now, I am going to force it to be 1024. I don't want to go too high of a shadow resolution in my testing. Yeah, we can always tweak it up later on. We just want to make it work first. So shadow resolution, I'm pulling it to 1024 just so that we make sure it's doing that. We're using the sun, which is our main light source here. Just making sure I'm going through all the paces, rechecking things as I do this. Here it is. We have sky and sun. The sun is a directional light. We're fine with that. Notice sunlight. This is the one I reversed the direction of the X and Z values so that the light backlights everything that we're doing. And it's going to be half the intensity of the original sun. So no matter what the sun gets set at, the directional light goes to half of its intensity. That's the plan. Yeah, we'll worry about more of that later on. That's not critical to what we're working on here. So these values are remarked out for now. Use poise sampling, that's all remarked out. Force that, bias, shadows, there's the one we're using. Here, if shadows is not null, I dispose it before it recreates it. Okay. Since we only created once, that'll tell us if it disposes it more than once, which if we dispose something after we set all these pieces in there, then definitely that would be an issue. But if we're only creating it once and it happens before we load all these other objects, that's not the issue. The rest of those are just settings. This is, okay, we're not doing that right now. That's fine. And the rest is the shadow set. Okay, that is the extent of that part of it. The thing is, over here we have the other end of it, which is receive shadows. And I want to double check and see what shadows we're receiving. Okay, we use this term a lot, of course, and we're going to see it in Babylon too, which I'm not going to go into Babylon. We don't need to change anything there, obviously. I'm not even worried about the admin mode, even though I want to remark out some of this probably, because I want to make sure admin mode isn't interfering with what we're doing. Common. That's our core. Okay, so starting with here, this one is process mold queue. This is when it actually gets created, and that's actually the right place that if receive shadows equals 1, then it puts it on here and sets it as true. That one is actually the best. If shadows set is greater than 0, then add shadow to shadow maps. That sends us to the function that we are doing. But notice we've already trapped receive shadows, so we do not need to check that. The only thing that's going to be running here, which we'll double check, is if it gets a shadow, if it casts a shadow. Okay, make sure I keep my wording right. That means that one's fine. These are just checking settings. And mold receive shadows equals false. We don't even need to check that anymore. I'm thinking we're not going to need this or that because it's never going to get here if it can't have a shadow. This one is already remarked out. That was the one I was starting to set. And it's a setting which we're not using. If S mode receive shadows are false, This one sets a color, and it's also setting this. This whole process right here, I do not understand what I was doing with it, so this one gets remarked out until I can reclaim it as a need. Like I said, things are interfering, so I'm going to get rid of the ones that aren't needed anymore. If mold receive shadows is false, here we go again. That's why I'm cleaning out this code. Reset mold opacity. Now, resetting the mold opacity, first of all, if they receive shadows, we're using the sun's intensity on the particular object. That's what that does. For now, I'm going to remark that out and make sure that we're not getting too bright, too little, too small, too big, too whatever. I'm going to make sure we're not interfering. So I don't want that in there. And of course, we do it for 3 different kinds of molds. And that means I'll find it one more time up here, probably. Let's see. There's 1. There's 2. And this one I remarked out all the way. Oh, because we're not highlighting the molds anymore anyway. I think this is phasing out. We're not even going to need that coding. We may not. I'll decide later on. So that takes care of... Oh, that takes care of that one. Shadow equals true. When I list the community molds, I'm showing that. But when I list the building molds, I'm not showing this. This is actually part of the listing for development tools. So I'm going to create shadow false, receive shadows. If mold receive shadows equals true, then receive shadows true, and we're going to add this little piece on the end here. I want to know if they have shadows. By the way, you can modify these anytime. There's a list building molds, list community molds, there's a list meshes. Any one of these, if you want to see something else come back in those results, these are very handy development tools that you can use just to check different things. I might move those to a different dev file or to a different file just so that you can find them easy. They're not always easy to find. We'll see about that. That's not exactly the highest concern at the moment. See what I mean? I'm checking this over and over again. And I'm setting them and casting them and changing them all the time. What's this one? When it first creates the shadow map, then it goes through and it's checking to see what needs to do anything to initiate. The thing is, this should be happening before anything gets placed in the scene, because it did say that when it gets created. So I think that's a null point because they're not part of the scene. It's happening before that could even happen. These objects aren't put in the scene, so none of them are going to come up clear, and we just made the scene load faster now. So that works. Okay, and I believe a number of these all happen in that area. Extra ground receives shadows. When this happens, extra ground is already created. So extra ground should receive shadows. That part should be good. I don't know, walking my way through this, talking my way through it. Okay. And just to see that I haven't broken something yet with like missing a closing bracket or something around something I remarked out. So we create the shadow map, and shadows aren't showing, so okay, we know. That's the part we're working on. We're going to make sure that they show on the extended ground and on this part. The extended ground, before I continue that, let's go through the rest of these. I don't have to set it a million times. I just need to make sure it's set once in the right place. And so far, I think I'm doing some overkill here. I think when I add light sources, it's a different story. Oh, wow, this one big area here. Set new mold. Okay. Set new mold happens whenever I'm working with a mold and I make changes to it in the admin tools. It shows me all those changes, and then if we decide to apply them, then it basically does just that at the very end. So I'm going to, since this is all about the shadow maps, I'm going to turn this section off for now. We can get that back in there afterwards. Oh, wait. Register mouse over would be a good part to leave in there. So let's do it here instead. And leave the if. That will get us into the right area. Now this is just the shadow setting part that's being remarked out. And we'll make sure, yes, we have all kinds of receive shadow pieces here. Okay. And receive shadows equals that. I'm setting it here. See, it's another place. I did it in the same function, I think. Yeah, this is the same function. There it is. Set new mold. Okay, go back to that line. I'm okay with remarking this out for the moment, but it will be put back in here. That one is going to be needed at some point in time. This is checking, receive shadows. Okay, they're just looking for values in a couple more places. I just want it to not trigger any of that stuff right now. I don't want anything to interfere with me testing and making sure that this stuff isn't doing it. I think I'm still in the same function. Is it? Set new mold. Yep. Wow, I did this in a lot of places. Okay. You know, that one's just checking the index of the field and making sure it has a value. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about changing that one. When it's working with this particular value that it sends, that's just making sure it has a value set. So those aren't going to make a difference. It's like opening the form and making sure that checkbox is checked. So that's what this is all doing. Okay, so that part of the admin is okay. And now we've taken out all the pieces that could interfere with what we're doing currently. Okay, so first things first. We're back to here. We're back to add shadow caster. I know I'm still about that particular function. And let's start with the extended ground, which happens right here's where the extended ground gets created. Like I said, I'm checking the order of things too. So here, That should happen before the shadow caster, and then the shadow caster should be able to add, see, create shadow map should happen after the extended ground is created, and that's happened in the right order. Okay. So let's jump back in here, go back to here. It's going to be, oh, that's all over the place. Okay, and this part, and now shadow set throws it off because there's shadows and then there's shadow set. Okay, here we create this and then we tell it extended ground receive shadows right here. Sometimes you got to dig in like this to make things work, and it's one of those days. We're going to make sure the shadows are working by the end of today. That's my goal. We had them before, and something happened where something happened to the code, something that we changed, modified, traded. Boy, I always say we whenever it's something that happened wrong. Notice that? I'm blaming you. Now I'll take the full blame. Create shadow map, and then add it extended. Okay, so it did all those steps. And now we need to make sure that this box, when it's created, gets added to the shadow map. That's all we have to do, is make sure that that box, when it's created, gets added to the shadow map. The best way to do that, I have this function that we've been working on, and that's what I was just digging in over here, is there's all of our settings, prime core. Oh, those are all shadow sets. Set shadow settings takes us back to this page, which does this stuff right here. It's in the common file, and okay, so I just want to make sure our shadow map is that, and we have add shadow caster. I want to check out that function and find out, because when I search for shadows, obviously that function, shadow caster, is not even listed here as an option, I don't think. There's all kinds of things in here. Okay, let's look it up. Part of the shadow generator. And add shadow caster. See, that's the function itself. And we get the mesh and oh, descendants. Oh, that's nice. That's why I use the shadow caster, because if we do it on the objects like an avatar that has descendants, then each one of them can cast shadows. Okay, that would bind shadow light. That's interesting. Okay, we'll get back to that stuff. Well, Babs. Where's our shadow caster? It says it's on this page. Find. Add shadow caster mesh, helper function to add mesh and its descendants to the list of shadow casters. Remove shadow caster does the same thing, include descendants. Okay, it was hidden in here, and I must have read this one day because I found it in the code. Who'd have thought, in the Babylon 101, right? That's a place we would expect to find it. Okay, so the only difference between Add Shadow Caster and basically pushing it to the shadow, yeah. The only difference between the two is the helper function now. That sends all of its descendants. So it checks for child objects and adds them to there. So I kind of like that one better because we do get the child objects, if there's any. Mesh and its descendants. Okay, so we're fine with that. Just wanted to validate that before I go any farther here. So now, if I go to, let's see, add mold to queue. I only search for that because a couple spaces underneath it is process mold queue. And add is one of the functions, and that's when we actually create the mold based on its definition, which means in here, when I remarked out, oh, here we go again. Add shadow to shadow map. See, I didn't even take all this stuff out of here. Right here, if I put this piece of code and I say shadows, that, we should get that mesh. Let's find out. This one should add mold.name. Just so I can make these stand out in my list, I'm going to also turn that yellow. That's the advantage of using my WTW log. I set it up where you can just throw a color in there and you can make things stand out. So F5. Let's first make sure that that is being added. Okay, we are adding the box, we're adding the Babylon file, and we're adding all three Babylon files. So this should cast something on that ground below us. That should be casting something on this extended ground. I don't see any reason why it isn't. It finds that object, but there's no casted ground under it. So something still isn't working at the basic level. But since I was, well, I told it to go to that. I told it to go there, but I had already remarked out what it's doing when it gets there. So shadows, add shadow caster, mold. That should have put that box in to the scene. There's no reason to go any farther than that. Okay, here we go again. Done. Select building. Here's my little test case place. This one I use for whatever I'm just trying to test at the moment. We have one box sitting here on the ground in this scene, and technically we should be casting a shadow from that box because we added it to the shadow caster and we created it. There's no other reason unless the light is directly above us. That's not the case. Yeah, we're not. I'm not seeing anything from that. Well, even then, the last box I had, I set it above the ground and it didn't leave a shadow either directly underneath itself. So I don't think that's going to be the case, but just for making sure, we're going to pull this just a little bit off the ground so that even if it tried to create a shadow directly underneath it, that's where we'd find it. And that's not doing it. So let's check something right here. WTW extended ground dot receive shadows Let's check that value, see what it does. If I typed everything right. Right when it loads it, it should already know that it's there, and we should have a shadow caster loaded in this scene. Okay, undefined. What did I type wrong? Probably typed extended ground wrong. Go to our core. Look up our extra ground. Sorry. It's extra ground, not extended ground. Okay. Go in here. Take extra ground. Receive shadows. I just want to see what that says it's set for. Shadows set for true. So we should see a shadow from that object. And I'm not seeing it. Not even far away. Yeah, there's no shadow on that object. Okay, back to the basics. So we have a light. And ground receives shadows equals true. Maybe it's an order thing. So let's take this just to do it and set it once again, even though we already know it's set for that. Once that's added to it, Shadowcaster gets that shadow mold in it. Then we try to do this. Is it about when you do it? Might be the case. Yeah, see, when I can see that light, that's definitely the directional light. That's definitely something. And we should see something. So there's obviously something very wrong here, and I'm not seeing it. Should be as easy as those few steps. try something. This is getting a little bit more extreme on what I'm testing, but I'm going to right here, right now, change this code because it's only happening once here. So I'm going to make sure if it's not null, we make it null, and then so if that shadows is not null, we're going to dispose of it. Then we're going to go and create the new shadow generator at 1024 using our sun. Then we're going to add shadows, this mold. Then we're going to take extra ground to receive shadows and say true. And if that doesn't do it, then we still have something still having an issue here. That should do something. Yeah, see, I'm not seeing shadows, and I even told it to be a number 1, so, you know, full black shadow. We should, oh, there it is. Okay. Hey, first sign of life. Okay, so we can see a shadow. We have something here. And I'm going to go a little bit lower on this just so that I don't need it to be so tall. Save the box. Okay, we have life. We're gaining something. Let me refresh that again. So something's interfering with our shadow caster. Because if this new scene, I know I keep doing this, I'm going to walk him over here where he's looking into the light so we can actually see the shadow casted. See, now we have a shadow casted right when I'm looking this direction. So let's set our starting point there just so we have something. Okay. What we have is, that means since we had to recreate our shadow caster here, then it means that there's something wrong with somewhere in here. It's actually ruining our shadow caster, and then we try to use it again. These steps work. So we know that part. So what I want to do is I want to take out these steps for now. Look for this. Actually, it should be copy, find. It should either have a space after it, which let's check those first. I want to just make sure what's happening here. Set shadow settings. I'm still... Oh, that's at the very beginning. Check to see if there's a cookie and find out if the shadow generator needs to be created, and set shadow settings gets thrown if it needs to create it. That's fine. Actually, if it's null, it always does this. I'll come back to that other thing. Set shadow settings is right here, and that is, now it's setting the display. It's creating the shadow map. So the shadow map is created, and extended ground has received shadows from that point in time forward. So the second we load this, those objects are already in place. I know. Shadow resolution, we already know it's 1024, which is exactly what we just used. And WTW sun is the exact same command. We threw it at that other place to see if it was going to work. Okay, so far we're good on this, and that telling it to create the shadow generator once. I just want find in files. I'm checking to see where we're interfering with our shadow generator. This one is remarked out. That's where we're working. This is, if it's not null, then we can remove that. That's fine. That has nothing to do with creating one. This is the one we're using that we're going to create. And it's the exact same WTW sun, so we're okay on that. Shadows null, which this part can clear it if it already exists. I don't think it already exists, and it only runs this once, so that's not going to be an issue. And that takes care of it. There are no other pieces on that. So now, check with a dot. See what else is interfering with it. Okay, we have a number of things here acting on it. Add shadow caster, that's our test case. Dispose, those are all marked out. Set darkness is one, that's where we want it. And that one is just doing that. Okay, we really do not have anything else interfering with our shadow caster. So now that I remark these pieces out right here, this should still work. And we're going to find out right now if that's the case. Because why are we not able to create it in one place and then use it in another? And it's not. I'm highly confused at how we can create one here, set the darkness, and that's it. And we've even proven that happens first. If anybody's seeing anything, speak up. You can save me some hours. So we create it, we set the darkness. But something about from here to this other piece of code right here, add Shadowcaster. I'm just curious, is it? If it's not null, then add these things. Let me find out if something's clearing it. It's still running that process. It's creating the shadow map. It's adding the extended. Mold names that, and shadow equals true. Let me double check and make sure we don't need to add the shadows again here. Because it's already set. We already know that. Nope. Well, there's one more place shadows gets used, and that's in the constructor. But then it wouldn't be there. Yeah, that can't be the constructor where it's having an issue. Just can't. Shadows null right here. That's when it creates all this. We don't even have the function loaded yet. It's not setting it to null, and it's not null when I try to use it. I can tell you that already. It's not null because we just checked if it's not null to do these things, and it just added them. I'm really confused at why that works and this doesn't. Something's corrupting it. But if I'm not appending anything else into it, say it inherits the setting from before, or if you have to add it after the fact. There's an order of appearance things on some of this stuff. Let me see if that erases the... I would almost guess, no, it's still there. So it doesn't matter that I did that first before I recreated the shadow caster. Wow. That's good to know. That means I do not have to set that each time. If I set it once on an object, it's good to go. Okay, well, mold receive shadows. I'm already doing it right here. Oh, but then it doesn't run this process on that item. Okay. But I am receiving the shadows. I'm setting it there. But I'm creating a new shadow caster here. Why is my general shadow caster not there? Kind of at a loss, because if this is done, why was that not already there? Why is it running like a different instance? Common page, main common code, this is the main thread. I don't see anything wrong in any of those areas. I've remarked out anywhere else that the shadow caster is being used. Shadows, no, that's no big deal. Shadow set, which is a different variable. Shadows, add shadow caster. That's the one we're working with. Shadows not null. Shadow set. Shadow remove is remarked out. Add mold. That's all remarked out. That's remarked out. We're not doing anything with it. We create it and leave it alone. We set up, we remarked out the bias. We marked out, the only thing we have is a darkness and a resolution. That's the only thing we're doing with it. Excuse me. Okay, anybody got any input? No. I've checked this more than once, and I create the shadow caster here in this code, and I even say when it's created in the side column here. So we create the extra ground, we create the shadow map, we add the shadow map to receive it here to the extra ground, and then we, when it creates this mold, which is this box on the screen right here, then we tell it, and we're checking again to the extended ground shadow is true, and that this piece we're adding to do it. So here it all works when I create the shadow map. And now once again, when I do it here and I do the test right when it creates that mole, which is the box, when it creates the box, I tell it to put it in there and to the shadows. Oh, wait. Let me try something. Window. If everything else looks good and there's no way that you can do it, the only thing left to do is it could be a timing issue. So let's test out, give it a second delay before adding the shadow caster to the object. Let's do it that way. Let's give it a second delay. And we're still not creating the Babylon or the shadow here, because I have a feeling it's actually rendering it too fast. And so certain parts aren't there when I'm trying to do it. When all else fails, if you can't get the thing to set right, give it a second delay, and no, I don't see anything. Come on, people. If it's not a delay issue, I don't know what the issue is. Nah, see, I'm just not seeing it here. Well, I bet you've watched me go in circles here long enough. I'm just going to have to keep on going. Sometimes you got to come back another day, get a fresh look at it and see what happens, but I'm going to do some more checking on things because, I mean, our sun is created here. So we know we have a sun. What if the sun intensity when it's created is too small? No, that should be intense. We should be okay. Never hurts to find out. We're going to find out what this value is because I think if the sun intensity is too small, maybe we're just not seeing anything cast a shadow, and then the sun comes up in our scene. Maybe it's happening after the fact, so maybe we're adding the shadow map too soon for its own good. Intensity's 1. That's full on. Never mind. That's not the issue. The sun is created. The sun has a directional light. We've seen it in other shadows here already. So for whatever reason, which I still don't get, it's treating our code to create the shadow map that's not the one I want. It's treating the code to create the shadow map as if, not this version of it, but when we run it up here, when we're actually creating it, it's almost acting like this is a local variable instead of a global variable. That's what it's acting like, because if it was using the global variable, then we shouldn't have a problem with finding it and using it in other places. Is there anything? There's no reason that should be treated as a local variable. And I've already proven that it's been set before it gets to this point. Now let's check the order of things again. There's one more piece here in the constructor. When it creates this, it could reset it to null if it wouldn't have the object if it didn't already have it. This is before I create my other function, so that should happen real early in the code. I would guess it happened first before all this other stuff. Yep, shadow set, there it is first. Everything else happens. That piece comes up, and there is no shadow casted from it. Huh. Well, you watch me battle this around for about 2 hours now, so I'm going to have to take a break on that, and I just don't get it. I really don't get that right now. There's no reason that that should create that the way it did. Wish I knew. That doesn't help. Okay, well, I'm going to have to keep on troubleshooting this and see if I can't figure out what's going on, see why. Maybe what I should do, instead of creating it here, but see, that's already created. And we put something to receive the shadows in it. Since I didn't use that variable. You know what? My next course of action is this. Let me find out. We're going to leave this where it's at. And first of all, I know that if I put these 3 lines of code right here, this works. Okay. So where else can I put it? First of all, let's confirm it works. We're going to back up through the code. We're going to find out where we can and can't put it and see if something's tweaking it. See if we can narrow down where it's having an error based on that. That's a troubleshooting technique. If we do that there, it shows up. If I take it out, it doesn't show up. So let's take these lines of code, X, and let's go up the code. Process mode Q. Let's do this here. I already think that this is going to be, it's going to be happening multiple times. It's going to dispose it, and then we're not going to use it. So I don't know if that's even going to work from this point of view. Yeah, it generates it. Okay, that's good to know. So the next part, find that, find in files. Process mode Q's there. We're telling it in the core. There's the action that tells it to process the mode Q. X on that. Go to this line of code in the core. And before it registers that action, which is going to happen on every frame, so it's basically just rebuilding it the whole time. But if I put these here before it even registers that, trying to find what's telling it to clear that, because there could be some weird command that's clearing our shadow maps. See, we still have it. We still have it here. Okay. someplace this is going to fail. And that's actually going to be the biggest insight of what's happening. So load connecting grid, that happens multiple times, one for every connecting grid in the scene. I don't think we're going to have a problem here, but I'm going to put it here and test it one more time. We're going to come to the bottom of this right now. There, we still have it. Okay, that's a good sign. Oh, load connecting grids. I'm going to see it right here. There it is. And get connecting grids. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Is that the only place this is getting called from? There's load connecting grids, and that's the only place. Okay. So, walking it back up through the code, take those, move it to the beginning of this function. This is the next best troubleshooting technique, because I already know if I remark it out, it disappears. So something in here, some line of code is telling it to not show that shadow anymore, or reset our shadow map. And I'm going to find it because we're going to keep on, well, let's see, get connecting grid. Let's see where we're using that function. There's only one, and it's on line 431, which is like right above us here. Okay. Go up another set of code. And get connecting grids right there. And, oh, see, this is our function that we set it. In fact, we set it right there. Okay, so let's try it here. And if we have to move it to right there instead of having it in that function, I think I could get away with that. But hang on. What I want to see now is, first of all, if I remark this out, does it still fail? I'm very curious now. If it works, I'm just going to, I don't know. Okay, so that's not working there. And because I'm messing with it in that area, I'm going to take this and move it right above where I'm checking these shadows here. And do we get it or not? No. Okay, we know we broke it in that function. I apologize every time I say we, because I do mean me. You didn't break anything. We must be talking about me and my dog Leo. I don't know where he is right now. Well, there he is. Come on, reconnect to my server. Sometimes when I work too fast or something, all of a sudden, boom, it just disconnects. I don't know why. It started happening after one of the Windows updates a couple generations ago. Or not generations. A couple of updates ago. A couple months ago. Oh, come on. Come on, back to me. Don't know why. Let's get our remote desktop back up and going. Stream still works, so that part's still working. And it's logging me back on. Don't know why that broke, but okay, we're back. Okay, so we know that it's happening in, well, let me double check here. This is a function. Those are just a setting. That's a setting, setting. That's just settings. I don't know about that. Okay, shadow setting wouldn't be, okay, I'm fine with it though. I did it for a reason at some time, a point in time, and so, in fact, I can really test this. Watch this. X there, and I'm going to put it right before this line of code here. And I'm guessing that we're not going to have a shadow. And when I put it right after that line of code, we're going to have a shadow, which means narrow it down within that same function. There's something in there that's killing our own function. And we're going to find it right now. Okay, so take that, find in files, and, well, I could even show you. Watch this. Well, we kind of did have it directly after that, but even in this if statement, knowing that that's the only time this gets created, looking at it, just the fact that it's after that, we have a shadow. Okay, fine. We're going to fix this right now. So take this piece, X, get shadow, find in files. There's our function, and what do we have? That's where we normally create it. And extra ground receive shadows. And that's all that's in here. Don't tell me my extra ground receiving shadows is the part that's breaking it. But let's put it in the bottom of this file. Some conditions doing this, and we're going to find out. So it works in this function. Just want to point that out. What did I do? Type something wrong and I can't tell. Move in front of these functions. Okay, they're all remarked out, so I know that's not where it's breaking it. We've walked this all the way back through the code from the very start, and notice we still have a shadow, which means let's try it right before that. And see if our extra ground receive shadows is what's breaking it. Don't know why, but could be happening. It's still there. That's not breaking it. Well, we're coming down to the exact point here because this and set darkness are the only two things left. I just got to say, my confidence is really interesting here. Set shadows, they're all spelled the same. Oh, let me guess, I didn't set the darkness. Don't tell me the darkness one is like not showing. I'm gonna kind of laugh if that's the case. And we have a shadow. Okay, watch this. Copy that, set it right there. Is that making it disappear? So darkness 1 is actually invisible. Oh, gosh. Okay, learn something new every day. Okay, so if I set it to 0.1, when I started this, I thought I was darkening the shadow, and all I did was make it disappear. And we have a shadow. Okay. Learn something new every day. And now that we know that, we can set this to 0.1. Gosh, I can't believe I had to do all that just to test it. And there we go. We now know. Don't set that to 1. I really would have thought 1 was solid and I was going to get a really solid black shadow. I really thought that was going to happen. Now that we know that, if I go back to that, find in files, I can get back to the other spot real easy here. Go there, Shadowcaster, we're adding this file to there. I don't even need to add it through this other map. It's actually doing it just by having it here. So the only thing I really need, we don't even need the timeout. That wasn't even needed. Okay, so if I take this and put it right here, just that one line, remark out the rest of this, just so we're not doing anything else but that one line, add shadow caster. And there we are. Okay, go back to our other scene. Well, it's good to know. That was how we broke it. How I broke it. I'll be specific. I can't believe it was something so simple, oblique. Well, wait. We do not have a shadow on this object now. So, what is different about when this is created? We're back to troubleshooting. Oh, wait a minute. Let me get where I'm seeing the shadow. I would see the shadow. It's got to be in the path of the sunlight to see the shadow, technically. So I need to make sure I'm kind of in this direction before it would even generate a shadow. So we'll leave that there. If I take this, that should generate a shadow. Okay, and oh, notice nothing in yellow. Why? Oh, wait, I didn't do it in yellow. Sorry. Copy that here, just so we know we should have a shadow of anything in yellow name. It may not like doing this to certain objects. And once it has those in the shadow mode, these Babylon objects, it may have already broken it. So we're going to find out right here. If mold name that index of Babylon file equals -1, then add this. And now just put that in here so that we're only saying it when it gets added. Okay, let's find out what happens now. So are the Babylon files messing up our other shadows? It's a good thing to know. And so far, I'm not seeing a shadow from that box. How is that box any different from anything else I've created? So, to do this fully correct and everything else, let's go back to here. Take, just like I did before, take this and bring it back down to here. I want to see if I create its own shadow caster using the sunlight. That would be, I don't even need those two lines, just put 1024 here. If I create the shadow there, does it work? We're going to be able to go through some of the code just like we did before and check this functionality out. But why is it not generating a shadow? It should happen. And that didn't help. Let's try it again. There we go. Loaded the area and got to get some shadows to work before you can get them all to work. I'm not seeing any kind of shadow coming from that box. Okay, so from where I'm standing, I should see a shadow coming from that box, and it should be pretty evident. So what I'm getting is that let's find out if, I want to see if that receive shadows on the extra ground is available or not. Shadow equals true. And notice how it is not generating a shadow. It should be on our side of the box. It should be there every time we do anything. It should be here, right here. It should be evident. I mean, there's no reason for it to not be. I cleared the shadow just like I did last time. All it did was create a box, and we even have the name. It is exactly a box like we did last time, even a building mold. And it doesn't have a setting, shadows set, because receive shadows, because if it did, it wouldn't show up in this area. So we've even tested that. I can't even make this one work right here, right when it's creating it. We could do the set timeout. I know I'm trying everything now. Set timeout and copy that to there. And now it's going to do it a second after it creates it, just so that it's happening in the right order. Scene loads very quickly, so there's no problem there. Now see, we're not getting the shadow. Okay, if I walk over this way, go over to about here and rotate right here. We should see a really clear shadow coming off that box. And so far, I'm not understanding why there's no other light source in this scene. Or are there? Another light source in this scene could cause an issue. Did I try to add another light source? Let's find out what all's loading here. Current meshes. We have our avatar. We have Babylon file, flagpole. We have a box. That's the box we're looking at, and there's another box right there. Babylon file, the T ground, Babylon. These are all parts of the Babylon file. Club grip, Babylon file, Babylon file. We have connecting grid. This one is the other box. So we have a box here and we have a box right there. Okay. We have the action grid, or action zones, which I expected. I didn't see anything about lights. There's no object added that is a light type. So we're not messing around with that other light molds. No, nothing out of ordinary here. We have our avatar, connecting grids, sky. Wait a minute. Where is community ground? That must be the ground. Instead of extended ground, did I call it community ground? We're going to find out right now. Extra ground is called submissive color. Wait a minute. Oh, that's setting the color after the fact, after it's created. Extra ground is created right here, and we call it community ground. Okay. E-ground, extended ground. Okay, got it. Extra ground, sorry. I keep saying extended, but it is extended is extra ground. Okay, well, as you saw, we got this to work in one form, and it works on a page where if I go to buildings, select building, and I go to my building from scratch, and it just has a box in the scene, then we're getting shadows. And just to confirm the other code that I'm doing here, we do not need that piece, so we don't need the delay. It's already available right when we do it. And we do not need to recreate the shadow map. It's already found all the way to here. All I'm doing is adding the mold to it, and it works. So just to confirm, it works on this level. The other scene must have something else loaded that's interfering with it, and I'm going to track that down, but I don't think there's any reason for you to tag along while I try to figure out where that's happening. I'm going to just double check some different pieces, set some settings. I may even temporarily move out the different Babylon file stuff to make sure that's not interfering with adding these things. But it's all part of, just trying to see how that's working and why that works and this other one doesn't. But I was able to show you a little bit of troubleshooting. We found a way to make it work, and then we backtracked it through the code until we found out which setting was wrong, and I'm embarrassed to say it happened to be something right there in front of me the whole time. Well, that's usually the case, isn't it? Okay, but I want to thank you for joining me today, and it's been a great day. We solved another thing about making shadows work, and I'm going to continue on that path, clear out some of the code that was doing the shadows the old way, make sure we're only doing the necessary pieces so that we're not overusing our shadows. I don't want to reinvent the wheel every time I do something with a shadow. I just want it to work and append and add things into it. And some of the stuff when I wrote it could have been 6 months or a year ago or even 2 years ago now or longer. And sometimes that's the characteristics of what made it work at the time. And then all of a sudden there's a lot more. Babylon has come so far. They've made so many advances. So now some of the protection things I did where I go to check and see, hey, when you add this piece, were these other pieces already in effect? Or was this, does it check all these pieces? So I had done all these extra tests to do shadows, like resetting different things that were already set. That's what made it work before. But now it appears that if you set something as receive shadows, you don't even have to mess with it again. It'll do it on the fly as you're going. That was something that I had to reset after I added a mesh to make sure that the shadows were understood on that particular object. And there was different pieces. But basically the idea is that it's all there now and it works just fine the way I would want it to right here. So if that works, then basically we should be able to make it work on everything else. So I'm going to walk it through this other scene. I'm going to start by taking out the, in fact, I can show you in 2 seconds. I'm going to show you one piece here that really makes a difference. And that is if I come into the code, first of all, this is the name of our building now. And so if I go and check the building molds that I'm currently using for this, and see how it has these 3 Babylon files in the center, I'm going to tell those temporarily to delete in my database. You can actually delete them from the scene and then recover them. So there's a way for you to do it through the interface. I just wanted to do it this way. And if I refresh the scene, I have a feeling that's where we're getting an error, is we're trying to add things from that part. So when we do this, no, we still do not have it in the scene. Okay, I'm going to do some more removing and adding and trying to come up with where that's happening. Yeah, I just don't know yet. So, yeah, I'll troubleshoot. In fact, I can even remove that object from the scene. I believe it's this one. Apply. Oh, notice that it did not add this object. So something didn't trigger to add that object. That's where I'll start. Try to find out why this object is being, well, see, we have a lesser intensity. Now let's back up to regular sky. Okay, it did not add this object, and I'm going to find out why. It could be, oh wait, I didn't tell it to do that. Sorry, I marked it out. It's putting it in the mix, but it didn't use it, so there's something going on there. And it is adding it to the set that should be working. Okay. Well, I'm going to track that down and figure out why in this scene it doesn't work, but in the other scene it does. There's something going on with the different pieces. Not sure why, but we'll find out. There's trouble in paradise. No. Okay, but I'll go through the different pieces and clean this up. And when I'm all done with this, this is another set that's going to be released with the current version that I have getting ready to go. I have a couple more pieces I want to add, and then I'm going to be sending this out with a new update, probably within, by the end of this week is my hopes, but might be early next week before I get it out there. But just want to let you know, working on it strong, and I want to thank you for watching. And we made some progress. Shadows are working in some scenes, and it didn't work in that scene, which, okay, we'll figure it out. But thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day, and I will see you again. I'll be back on soon.